International backlash is mounting over Israel's approval of legislation mandating the death penalty for West Bank Palestinians who were convicted on terror charges for deadly attacks. The passage of the bill Monday marked the culmination of a years-long drive by the far right to escalate punishment for Palestinians convicted of nationalistic offences against Israelis. Aside from rights groups, the law is attracting criticism internationally. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez called it one step closer to apartheid, and the European Union said it was a clear step backwards. Charlotte Hughes has more on the law.
It's a move that prompted applause from some in the Knesset, but one that has also drawn international criticism. On Monday, Israel's parliament approved legislation that would make the death penalty the default sentence for Palestinians convicted in military courts of deadly attacks. Far-right lawmaker Limor Sonhomele, who survived an attack by Palestinian gunmen in which her husband was killed, hailed the bill.
This law is the most moral expression of a nation that wants life. It establishes a direct and clear equation. Whoever decides to murder Jews just because they are Jews is doomed to die.
The bill includes provisions requiring an execution by hanging within 90 days of sentencing, with a possible delay of up to 180 days. In theory, Jewish Israelis could also be sentenced to death under the law. However, this would be extremely unlikely due to its wording, since it states that the sentence should be carried out when the intention of the attack is to, quote, negate the existence of the State of Israel. Several European countries, including the UK, France and Germany, have warned it risks undermining, quote, democratic principles. Opposition lawmaker Yair Lapid is also among those who have denounced the law.
We are not like Hamas. We are the opposite of Hamas. We did not come to the Middle East to adopt Sharia law. We did not establish a Jewish state to adopt the moral standards of radical Islam.
The Association for Civil Rights in Israel has lodged an appeal against the legislation with Israel's Supreme Court.
For more analysis on this story, we can welcome Bentzi Sykora, Policy Director at the Zulat Institute for Equality and Human Rights. Thank you very much for your time with us on France 24. I'd like to start by asking what your reaction is to the passing of this law.
It's heartbreaking. It's one of the saddest days I think I've experienced in a long time, and it's been a rough few years here. The bill that passed is one of the single worst pieces of legislation that's ever passed through Israeli parliament because, as you explained, it's just so blatantly racist. But we're also not giving up hope. We're already in the process. You mentioned there's already been an appeal that's been submitted to the Supreme Court. We're in the process of submitting our own appeal. And Israeli society has proven that it's willing to fight for the court. It's maintained the court. It's fought to keep the court alive and the judicial system alive, and we're going to stop the law from taking hold. We're confident that the Supreme Court will shoot this down because, like we said, it's so blatantly unconstitutional.
So then, given the likelihood that the Supreme Court will strike it down, why do you think that this law has passed now, and what do you think the goal is behind this legislation?
This bill has been floated around on the fringes of the populist far right, led by the blatant racist Itamar Ben-Gvir for many, many years. It's never really gotten traction. They saw political opportunity following October 7th, following the 900 days of war. Since then, Israeli society is exhausted and deeply, deeply traumatized, and they saw an opportunity to pass it. But it's an attempt for them to advance their disgusting political ideology, and he sort of wins either way, right? Either he's able to pass and advance his despicable ideology, or it gets shot down and they get to attack the Supreme Court again. So for him, this is purely politics. We even know from speaking to other members in the coalition leading up to the bill that they were ashamed of having to vote for this. They don't support it. They're hoping the bill gets shot down. But it's a cheap political ploy driven by a small minority within this country that's taken our entire political system, hijacked it. But it doesn't represent the majority of the Knesset, the majority of the country, and they're aiming for cheap political points. But it's not. But we're doing everything we can, and we're confident that it's not going to remain.
On what grounds might the Supreme Court strike it down?
Again, like we said, it's so blatantly unconstitutional. You mentioned it before. The fact that it's de facto what it does is it differentiates between Arab and Jewish terrorists. And again, we obviously are against the death penalty categorically. We believe that it's inherently immoral. But even if you disagree on that, the fact that it differentiates by blood is just, it's not something that any democratic country can accept. And Israel still remains a democracy despite the best efforts of members of Knesset like Itamar Ben-Gvir. So it doesn't hold up to Israel's constitutional values. It also, additionally, it tries to legislate within the West Bank, which again is not under Israeli sovereignty as much as Itamar Ben-Gvir may like it to be that way. So they don't have the jurisdiction there. The law, so it's going to fall on so many different issues. Also, like you mentioned, the 90 days that it has to be acted upon, and the fact that there's such a narrow clemency options just means that it doesn't hold up to the status and the standards that we have in Israel.
You referred to this earlier on. The Israeli government has been trying to reform the judiciary for the past several years, and the Supreme Court is seen as kind of the cornerstone of Israeli democracy. And so you said that if this bill is struck down, we can expect accusations of bias from the government. But is that all?
We're heading into an election year. We know that we've seen it in other backsliding democracies as well, that they're going to probably try to ramp up their attacks. As of now, they've sort of drawn a line in the sand, and they haven't yet been willing to take us into a full constitutional crisis. But we're laying the groundwork, and we're preparing for that option as well. We're aware that Netanyahu is desperate to hold on to power, and they will do anything they can to stay in control. But we're laying the groundwork, and we're very well prepared, and we're going to stop them. We're going to do everything we can to stop them from trying to cross that line.
You said that this law doesn't reflect the wider sentiment among the population. You did say, of course, Israelis are traumatized and exhausted after the Hamas attacks and the war with Gaza. What is the sentiment among Israelis?
It's been honestly rather muted. Like me and other members of civil society have been participants with it throughout the committee discussions on the bill until recently, the last couple of weeks when the war started and we weren't unable to, and they cynically used the war to advance the legislation while we could not participate. But we were there, and it's not something that has had widespread support from the public or even from other members of the coalition. This is a passion project of Ben-Gvir and his Kahanist Jewish supremacist party. They're the only ones pushing for this aggressively, and it's. The polls show different things, but it's not been at the top of the agenda for most Israelis. Most Israelis, I think, are mostly just disgusted that this is what our government is doing while we're at war and we're just trying to survive the day, Do
you think that this law could fuel retaliation and escalate violence?
It's one of the reasons that we objected to it, among many. When we were sitting in almost every single professionals from the different ministries who participated, be the security apparatus or be it from the Ministry of Justice, they all expressed their concerns with the bill, stating, among other things, that it could lead to retaliations, that it's not been proven effective worldwide, and the Shin Bet, Israel's security apparatus, has historically rejected this legislation, because they said it could actually have the reverse result and end up leading to attempted kidnappings as a tool of retaliation or as a tool of negotiation against upcoming capital punishments. So that's one among many, many reasons that we object to this legislation. Yeah.
All right. And of course, now the Supreme Court will decide whether or not it hears these petitions to have this thrown out. Bentzi Sykora, Policy Director at the Zulat Institute for Equality and Human Rights, thank you very much for your time.